Japso Jen Daji Jinso Jip Jen Dola Benjir Sanje Jobara Jo Sanje Jodan Zoji Jonam La Janjo Baradu Dani Japso Jen Daji Jinso Jibe Zonan Dola Benjir Sanje Jobara Jo Sanje Jodan Zoji Jonam La Janjo Undani Japso Je Daji Jinso Jibe Zanam Je Thola Ben Sanje Drobara Jo Zemjan Damje Dewa Dan Debe Judan Dembara Juj Dunga Dan Dunga Je Judan Drevara Juji Dunga Mebe Dewa Damba Dam Indre Wara Juji Nyeri Jadan Tandre Ve Tongyo Pola Neba Juji Pade Zave Lama Rinpoche Taji Jivora Bede Denchol Kadin Chamblu Gone Jezun Kuzon Dojing Drop Zadoz Chom Dende Jambeya Chazelo Ganji Lord Dini Dinda Nida Nanda Laze Dungu Zijin Zijire Niji Doga Levavzi Kanda Zibe Zara Mare Mando Dongara Jizi Rozogal Uje Dase Yala Dojo Yadezu Dodai Jado Nyamo Nilo Lege Chakro Dozeji Mare Mensa Donga Nyoko Jinye Chose Redina Dene Dashin Sachu Darso Yonde Luso Jerze Dogu Chodra Chodon Chuni Jende Dalu Munsera Jambe Yon La Du Zeden Jeji Jenrab Sen Dalu Timok Mumbarab Sen Kadan Tenchu Chunlong Dobai Lode Bobe Nawa Zanu Bonjour à tous.
Hello everyone. Hello to everyone following online. We will continue with our study of the Abhidharmakosha. So we're continuing here with the fourth main section of the first chapter. This section is entitled The Complete Classification of the Dhatus. It is made up of 7 subsections. We now come to the seventh, we have come to the 7th subsection, which is classification into internal and external, etc. This 7th subsection is made up of 7 further subsections. And we now come to the 4th subsection. So in this classification into external, internal, etc., we saw the classification into internal and external. The second subsection was the classification into active dhatus and dhatus resembling or that are a semblance of this. The third subsection is the classification into abandoned by the path of seeing, etc., which brings us to the classification into what sees and what does not see. And this subsection classification into what sees and what does not see itself contains two subsections. The first subsection is called the classification in and of itself, and the second presents supplementary points. Concerning this point, the classification into what sees and what does not see, we will look at this classification, and it concerns which dhatus are view and which are not view. We'll begin by explaining the meaning of this term, view. So we begin with the first subsection, the classification in and of itself. Here, the root text says, stanza 41, lines 3 and 4, I and part of the mental object dhatu are views, 8 types. So what this last part of stanza 41 tells us is that there's one material dhatu and... Wait a second, what? Yeah, one which is I faculty and the others that are non-material that are view. So the only material dhatu, which is view, is I faculty. Why? Because I faculty is called view in general. It is commonly called this, referred to in this way in the world, including in Tibetan and in Sanskrit. I faculty is commonly called view in the world. Here, Khelzang Puntso gave an example. There was someone in the room during this retreat whose name in French is Olivier, but they also have the Tibetan name Karma Sherab Gamso. So Khelzang Puntso addressed this person as Olivier, or also Karma Sherab Gamso. So it's necessary to know that karma means activity, sherab means discernment, and gamso means ocean, the terms. So Khelzang Puntso addresses this individual, Karma Sherab Gamso, and says, you are not your name. You're not discernment, you're not an ocean, but that's your everyday name, and everyone knows you by this. When we call you Karma Sherab Gamso, we refer to you, but we're not referring to the meaning of the words. It's just that you're known by this name. It's a name in terms of usage. In the same way, material dhatu of I faculty is called view because it is commonly designated as such in the world. So next come the explanations of the 8 non-material dhatus that are referenced in the root text. We'll see that these 8 are also view, but more particularly that they correspond to the meaning of view, as opposed to I faculty, which does not. So there are non-material dhatus that are also commonly called view, and this concerns 8 conditioning phenomena not associated by similarity. Yeah, sorry, a little mistake here. 8 conditioning phenomena associated by similarity. 8 conditioning phenomena associated by similarity. So first come the 5 afflictive obscurations that are views. We talked about these yesterday. As a reminder, these 5 are the view of a whole in destruction, view that grasps extremes, false view, view that grasps a view as supreme, and view that grasps an observance, an asceticism as supreme. Those are what are referred to as the 5 afflictive obscurations that are views. So out of the 8 that covers 5, 3 remain. The 3 remaining are authentic worldly view, view on the path of learning, and view on the path of no more learning. We can repeat. The remaining 3 are worldly view, view on the path of learning, and view on the path of no more learning. We have now presented these 8 mental objects that are view. And then Khelzang Puntso explained the meaning of the term view. The essence of these 8 views, the ones we just mentioned, the 5 which are afflictive obscurations, and the 3 which are authentic worldly view, view on the path of learning, and view on the path of no more learning. These views are discernment, sherab. What is this discernment? It is analyzing things and coming to conclusions. That's the first aspect. Discernment, they are discernment, which is analyzing and coming to conclusions. And then, in the entourage of this discernment, there are sensations, distinctions, conditioning phenomena, etc. And all of this is what is called view. So we find this discernment, which is the central element, and then the entourage that we find around this discernment. All of this is what we call view. So we have defined what view is. We've named the 8 views, and now we'll go into further explanations of each of these 8. We'll begin with the first 5 views. The first 5 views are associated with afflictive obscurations. They are based on a mistaken mode of functioning or understanding. It's not specified. These 5 views, these 5 afflictive obscurations that are views, it's said that they are like seeing a shape in the dark of night. In fact, we don't see anything. Indeed, these are completely mistaken views about the 4 truths of the Noble Ones. So that concerns the first 5 views. And then we come to the last 3. Begin with authentic worldly view. This authentic worldly view refers to the path of accumulation and the path of junction. The first 2 paths of the 5 paths concerning the Buddhist path. This authentic worldly view corresponds to discernment on the path of accumulation and the path of junction. It is said that This is also like looking at a shape in the dark of night, but the moon is shining. So we see a semblance of the shape. Indeed, on the path of junction, we see the mode of being of the Four Truths of the Noble Ones, but we do not see it clearly. That concerns authentic worldly view. Next, we come to the view on the path of learning. Here it's said that this view is like seeing a shape or a form in the middle of the day, but it's a cloudy day. So we see things clearly, but nevertheless there are shadows. This shadow refers to the veil of afflictive obscurations, which are to be abandoned. And last, we come to the view on the path of no more learning. And here it's said that this is like seeing something in the middle of the day when the sun is shining bright. Because at this stage we know things perfectly and there are no longer any afflictive obscurations. We are on the path of no more learning, and all of the afflictive obscurations have been abandoned. Therefore, there is no longer anything that obscurates or obscures discernment. This presentation of the 8 views shows that by way of the 5 paths, there is clarity that develops progressively. Next, we come to a supplementary remark, which comes from the following session of explanations. Khelzang Puntso added a remark about this point. He said that concerning the material dhatu, that is view, and the non-material dhatus, that are view, he began with this question: between these two, which are truly view? And concerning the definition that was given, what is truly view concerns the 8 views, because in essence these 8 views are discernment. As we saw, discernment is analyzing and coming to conclusions. And thus, in this way, these 8 views are truly view. The I faculty dhatu is designated as being view, but not in terms of the meaning of what view truly is. In other words, not in terms of discernment, but rather in terms of how we commonly refer to it. Because the eye sees, therefore, I faculty is commonly referred to in the world as view. However, as we just said, view is discernment, which can be split into the 8 views. So you're wondering, among the 5 views that are afflictive obscurations, which is the 4th? Well, we can just read them all back out, no? Or the 4th one is the view that grasps a view as supreme, and the fifth is view that grasps observance and asceticism as supreme. So that was just a quick repetition for someone in the room. Now we have concluded the classification in and of itself of what sees and what does not see. That was the first subsection here. We'll come now to the second subsection, which concerns supplementary points on this topic. So once again, we are looking at the supplementary points concerning the classification into what sees and what does not see. There are 6 supplementary points. The first is a refutation of the fact that discernment, a refutation of the fact that the faculties discernment is a view. Now we're going to go a bit further into the distinction concerning which dhatus are view and which are not. For example, we'll ask ourselves, are the 5 sense consciousnesses view or not? This is what Vasubandhu refers to in stanza 42, lines 1 and 2. Vasubandhu replies, cognition associated by similarity with the 5 consciousnesses is assuredly non-conceptual. This is why it is not a view. Here, Vasubandhu says that the 5 sense consciousnesses and all of their entourage are not view. They are not view. Why? Because everything that is view is discernment associated with mental consciousness. Everything that is view is discernment related to mental consciousness. Here, when we are talking about the 5 sense consciousnesses and everything connected with them, this is not associated with mental consciousness. And therefore, it is not view. It is not discernment. What is presented here is that everything that is view is in the entourage of mental consciousness, and everything that is not in the entourage of mental consciousness is not view. Everything that is view is in the entourage of mental consciousness, and everything that is not part of the entourage of mental consciousness is not view. So that concerns the first supplementary point, which concerns the refutation that the discernment of the faculties is a view. Now we come to the second point. Proof that I is view. This begins with the first point, proof in and of itself. So the subsection of proof that I is a view, beginning with the proof in and of itself. So now comes a question. Is it the I that sees visible phenomena, or is it visual consciousness that sees visible phenomena? Is it I, or is it visual consciousness that sees visible phenomena? The answer is in stanza 42, line 3. I sees visible phenomena. Here, Vasubandhu tells us that the active I organ is what sees visible phenomena, and not the consciousness supported by it. It is the active I organ that sees visible phenomena, and not the consciousness supported by it. This is the Vaibhashika point of view. And now some doubts arise, which are the object of the second subpoint, clarification of doubts. We will look at 3. The first part is an analysis of whether all eyes see or not. Continuing on with stanza 42, the one endowed with the capacity of supporting. As was just said, active eye organ is what sees visible phenomena. Here, the one endowed with the capacity of supporting, you may recall that we already saw this phrasing in the classification of active dhatus and dhatus which are a semblance of this last. The translation is a little bit up in the air, but hopefully it rings a bell. So here, the analysis of whether I sees or not. The second is an analysis of whether it is eye or ocular consciousness that sees. Second point, analysis of whether the eye or the ocular consciousness sees. So the end of stanza 42, beginning of stanza 43. Consciousness does not rely on it. There's a typo. Why? Because it does not see a hidden visible phenomenon, they say. We can recall the point of view of the Vaibhashika is that active eye organ is what sees visible phenomena and not the consciousness supported by it. In other words, not visual consciousness. Why? If consciousness saw, it could see a hidden visible phenomenon. It could see a visible phenomenon that escapes view. Why? Because visual consciousness is not touchable. It is not susceptible to collision or lacking in obstruction. If consciousness could see, then it would be able to see a hidden visible phenomenon. When an object is hidden, we do not see it. Therefore, visual consciousness is not what sees. Indeed, it is I that sees. This is the Vaibhashika point of view. But what do the Sautrantika say on this subject? The Sautrantika say that visual consciousness is what sees visible phenomena and not the eye. According to them, the fact that we do not see a hidden object is due to outer circumstances. If the outer conditions that allow for seeing the object are gathered, then the object is visible. However, if these outer conditions are not gathered, then the object is not visible. The fact that the object is visible or not does not depend on consciousness, according to the Sautrantika. According to them, this depends on outer conditions. Once again, the Sautrantika, they hold that visual consciousness is what sees and not I. So let's consider an example concerning a window and water. Here, the windows are clean and we can see through them. All of the outer conditions have come together or are gathered in order for us to see through the window, in order for us to see the objects that are outside the window. When we see dolphins in the water, the outer condition, water, does not prevent seeing the dolphins. Between ourselves and the dolphins, the obstacle of water is present, and yet, despite the presence of water, we are able to see the dolphins. The same is true for the window. We see trees through the window. Nevertheless, between ourselves and the trees, there is the obstacle of the window. Nevertheless, we see the trees. Therefore, it is the outer conditions that allow for visual consciousness to see visible phenomena. If we can see the outer object, this does not depend on consciousness, it depends on outer conditions. The Sautrantika hold that we can see objects behind another object, which is not the point of view of the Vaibhashika. The Sautrantika have another refutation concerning the Vaibhashika statement that I is what sees. They say How can the eye see objects behind an obstacle given that the eye is material, given that it is susceptible to collision or obstruction? If eye is what sees, how can it see trees behind a window? Given that the eye is material, it would bump into the obstacle of the window and it would not be able to see the objects behind the window. Based on this, the Sautrantika hold that eye is not what sees, because if there is an obstruction to view, given that eye is susceptible to collision, it would not be able to see through it. Thus, the Sautrantika say that visual consciousness is what sees, because due to the fact that the eye is susceptible to collision, it would not be able to see outside, for example. Concerning the Vaibhashika's argument that holds that eye is what sees, the Sautrantika refuted: if we do not see an object behind another, it's not due to the fact that the eye that sees. It's because the outer conditions have not come together for seeing an object behind another. If the outer conditions have come together, then we can see it. If the outer conditions do not come together, we cannot see it. If the water's dirty, we can't see what's beyond the water, the bottom of the water. Thus, the Sautrantika say that visual consciousness is what sees, and that if we do not see an object behind another, it is due to the outer conditions not coming together. That is the second point concerning the clarification of doubts. The analysis of whether it is the eye or ocular consciousness that sees. Now we come to the third doubt. Analysis of whether both eyes see or not. Analysis of whether both eyes see or not. So another question comes up here. Does one eye see or do both eyes see? Stanza 43, lines 3 and 4 tells us, both eyes also see because vision is clear. Thus, both eyes see. Why? Because we see clearly. Nevertheless, there remains a doubt. Someone might think that we can see with only one eye. Does only one eye see or do both? For example, if I close one of my eyes, I still see something. But if I open the second one, I won't see more. Thus, only one eye sees. Vasubandhu does not agree with this and maintains that we see with both eyes. This concludes the third point within the clarification of doubts concerning the proofs that I is a view. Let's take a short meditative break. So now we'll continue with the supplementary points concerning the classification into what sees and what does not see. This brings us to the third subpoint in the supplementary points, which is the particularity of the faculty's grasping of the object. This point, the particularity of the faculty's grasping of the object, contains two subsections. One is faculties and objects that touch each other or not, and faculties and objects that are the same size or not. We'll begin with the faculties and objects that touch each other or not. Once again, we will reply to a question that we may ask. So, concerning the 6 consciousnesses, the 5 sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousness, they grasp an object. Is there contact or not with the object? In other words, how do the consciousnesses grasp their object? This is explained in stanza 44, lines 1 and 2. The eye, the mental, and the ear are the 3 that do not come into contact with their object. In other words, eye faculty, mental faculty, and ear faculty know their object without coming into contact with, know their object without coming into contact with it. So we'll look at the Vaibhashika view concerning contact a little bit more here. So, what is meant by contact or non-contact between the object and the faculty? In general, the Vaibhashika understand contact to mean the absence of other matter between two things. The Vaibhashika do not necessarily conceive of contact as a link of proximity, in other words, as being two things that touch. According to them, if between two things there is no other matter in between them, then this is contact. So let's consider faculties that apprehend their object without contact. Between the eye faculty and the visible phenomenon, there can be a lot of atoms. Due to this, there is no contact between these two, eye faculty and visible phenomena. The same is true for ear faculty and sound. Likewise, there are other atoms between these two. And thus, once again, there is no contact between these two elements. The other faculties, nose faculty, tongue faculty, and body faculty, need contact to apprehend their object. In order for them to apprehend their object, there must not be any other atoms between the object and the faculty. There's a little explanatory remark concerning this. For us, we say that something is in contact with something else when these two things touch, but for the Vaibhashika, this is not the case. Consider the example of tongue faculty and the object that is taste. Between the tongue and the taste, there must be contact. In this case, contact doesn't mean that there's an absence of space between them. It means that there must not be any other atoms between these two things, the tongue faculty and the taste object. According to this logic, there can be space between a faculty and its object and still be contact. However, if there are atoms other than taste that slip into the space between the tongue and the taste, then there will not be contact. At this point in the explanations, Khelzang Puntso shared the Mahayana point of view with us concerning contact. He said, what is the point of view of the great vehicle, whether it be the Chittamatra or the Madhyamaka, concerning the fact that consciousness grasps via contact or without contact? The Vaibhashika and the Sauchantaka affirm that the eye and the ear apprehend their objects without contact. In other words, despite the fact that there are other atoms between the faculty and the object. Thus, these two faculties apprehend their objects without contact. This point of view is not valid for holders of the great vehicle, because if there's no contact with an object, then we could see an object hidden by another object. Those of the great vehicle say that if consciousness can grasp the object without the faculty coming into contact with its object, this would mean that we could see an object hidden by another object. However, adepts of the great vehicle also do not validate the fact that I can see with contact. To illustrate this, they use the example of a contact lens. The lens is in contact with the eye, and yet it is not seen. Thus, those of the great vehicle hold that the eye does not grasp by way of contact, nor by way of absence of contact. They say the same thing concerning the ear. The Vaibhashika say that ear apprehends sound without contact, that the ear can grasp a sound that is distant. Between the ear and the sound, there are other atoms. For the Vaibhashika, since contact means there are no atoms between the faculty and its object, then they hold that ear faculty grasps its object without contact. The Madhyamaka do not agree with this. They say if we plug our ears, then the sound doesn't reach our ears. This proves that contact between sound and the ear is necessary. But at the same time, they say that saying that contact between the ear and sound is also not a valid proposition, because if someone shouts from very far away, the fact that sound has no continuity means it wouldn't reach the ears. Indeed, in order for sound to reach our ears, time is necessary. Yet we saw that sound has no continuity, that when sound is produced, it stops the moment after. This means that we cannot hear by way of contact. This is what the Madhyamaka hold or support. This requires some reflection. I'm just repeating what's said for now, but take some time and think about it. The Vaibhashika reply to the Madhyamaka, well then what's your point of view? You say that the object is not apprehended by contact, nor without contact. So how do you explain it? The Madhyamaka reply that they do not have a point of view. Awesome. It's a lot simpler. Okay, let's continue. The Vaibhashika then ask, then how can we see and hear? The Madhyamaka reply, this can be produced, but there's no need to think that it's real, because it's only an illusion. And anything is possible with an illusion. For example, in a dream, anything is possible. If we sleep for 6 or 7 hours, we can dream an entire lifetime within this amount of time. But when we wake up, we can clearly see that this is illusion. The Vaibhashika say, the Madhyamaka say that it's not necessary to investigate the illusion, but to leave things as they are. They say, we do not uphold a point of view. It's possible, but how? We don't know. We don't know if there is contact or if there is not contact. But if you believe that this thing is real, then there lies the problem. So that's what Khelzang Puntso shared with us concerning the Great Vehicle's point of view concerning contact or absence of contact. And then he explained why he brought up the point of view of the Madhyamaka and the Great Vehicle in this explanation that comes from somewhere else. The reason, he said, the reason why I present these points of view is because it's very easy to say that everything isn't real, but it's much more difficult to really understand it. If things were real, then we would need to investigate to determine things and to come to a conclusion. For example, concerning this question of whether eye and ear faculty apprehend their object by way of contact or not. On the basis of this postulate that considers things to be real, and based on this investigation, okay, let's try again. If we follow the one sec. Okay, it's a little hard to determine what is actually meant here. If we think that everything is illusion, we don't have all of these problems. But if we start from a basic logic that everything is real, then it's impossible to say that things can be born with or without contact at the same time. Khelzang Puntso continues by saying that if we reflect based on this example, then we'll be able to understand fairly easily that the true mode of being of all phenomena is devoid of true nature, that phenomena are like an illusion. And Khelzang Puntso tells us that he shared the Madhyamaka's view with us here to give us an opportunity to apprehend the idea of ultimate truth. So this concludes the subsection concerning faculties that touch or not. This brings us to the next point, which concerns faculties and objects that are the same size or not. As we saw, the Vaibhashika hold that eye and ear grasp their object without contact, and that the three other faculties, nose, tongue, and body faculty, grasp their object by way of contact. But what is the dimension of the objects that these faculties can grasp? Do these faculties grasp objects that are the same size as they are, smaller or larger? Stanza 44, lines 3 and 4 read, "It is considered that the three, the nose, etc., grasp an object of their dimension." Concerning the size of the object apprehended by the different faculties, Vasubandhu only talks about nose, etc. The term etc. refers to tongue and body faculty. Vasubandhu simply says that it's considered that the nose and the two other faculties, in other words, tongue and body faculty, grasp an object of their own dimension. This affirmation thus implies that the three other faculties, eye, ear, and mental faculty, can grasp objects of different dimensions. This concludes this point. Now we come to the next point. So we are continuing with the classification into what sees and what does not see. We are looking at the subsections of the supplementary points. This next one is the fourth one, which concerns the certain temporality of the support. Now, we will analyze the link between the six consciousnesses and the six faculties. These six faculties are the six supports, and these six consciousnesses are what is supported by the six faculties. We can also say the faculty is the support of the consciousness or for the consciousness. Now we will see whether the six faculties and the six consciousnesses work simultaneously, or whether there is a lag between them. Stanza 45, line 1, the support of the last is past. Here we'll focus on the relationship between mental faculty and mental consciousness. the relationship between mental faculty and mental consciousness. Mental faculty is the support for mental consciousness. Concerning these two, do they function at the same time, or is there a lag between them? We saw previously that mental faculty is a consciousness among the 6 that has ceased just before. This means that between mental consciousness and mental faculty, there is a lag in time. Mental faculty does not accomplish its function at the same time as mental consciousness. Mental faculty is before, comes before mental consciousness. This concerns the relationship between mental faculty and mental consciousness. Now let's consider the relationship between the 5 sense faculties and the 5 sense consciousnesses. The 5 sense faculties are the support for the 5 sense consciousnesses. Is there a time lag between the sense faculties and sense consciousnesses, or do they accomplish their function at the same time? Concerning the 5 sense faculties and the 5 sense consciousnesses, their action is simultaneous. Both accomplish their function at the same moment. There's not one that comes before or after. There are different opinions concerning this subject. The Vaibhashika accept that cause and effect can be simultaneous, whereas the Sautrantika do not accept that cause and effect can be simultaneous. Thus, the Vaibhashika accept that between the faculty and the consciousness, there can be simultaneity, that they can be at the same time. Whereas the Sautrantika say that concerning the faculty and the consciousness, they cannot be simultaneous. There is a time lag. Why? Because, by contrast, in contrast with the Vaibhashika, they do not accept that a cause and effect can be simultaneous. The root text expresses the Vaibhashika point of view in stanza 45, line 1. Line 2. The support of the 5 is also born simultaneously with them. In the root text, we find the word also. What does it mean? Karmapa explains this. He says, there are 6 faculties, I, etc. Visual consciousness is simultaneous with I faculty. The same is true for the 4 other sense consciousnesses, which are simultaneous with their respective faculties. Sometimes these 5 consciousnesses can be mental faculty. Among these 5 consciousnesses, some will be mental faculty and others will not. Those that are not mental faculty are simultaneous with their respective... She said faculties, but I think she means consciousness. Oh no, faculty. Those that are not mental faculty are simultaneous with their faculty. Yes. Those that are mental faculty are also simultaneous with their own faculty. This explains the term also. This concludes our repetition for this month. The 5th, 6th, and 7th. Well, there are a few remaining subsections concerning what sees and what does not see. We'll have a short question and answer. Before that, I just wanted to quickly remind you of the essential email addresses that you can contact for certain subjects concerning general questions for the Chinrezi curriculum cycle. You can write to Retraite in French. One sec, I'm just going to spell it out for you here. Okay, so RETRAITE Rinpoché, RINPOCHE @dhagpo.org. Concerning questions about the repetitions, you can write to dkl.restitution or presentation is what it means, but anyway, the spelling of this email address is dkl.restitution @dhagpo.org. The last time we saw you, we also mentioned that there is an email address related to the kosha. If you wrote it down, technically it's usable, but for organizational reasons, it's preferable that you write to the email address that I just gave you, dkl.restitution@dhagpo.org. And in fact, related to this point, there were some questions that were sent to that previous email address related to the kosha, and we haven't replied to them yet, but we did get them and we'll reply to you soon. I don't always understand as I'm writing things down, but concerning stanza 42, lines 1 and 2, okay, so I wrote down that the five sense consciousnesses are not view because view is what is discernment. I wrote down that everything that is view is in the entourage of mental consciousness, and everything that is not is not. What is said is that everything is view is in the entourage of mental consciousness, and everything that is not in the entourage of mental consciousness is not view. It doesn't seem to be any contradiction. Okay. It seems like I forgot to write down a word. Thank you very much. I have a question about each of the views. Authentic worldly view corresponds to the path of accumulation and the path of junction, and view on the path of learning, that corresponds to another path. The details weren't given in the presentation, but the path view on the path of learning corresponds to the path of seeing and the path of meditation. These two can be, they're two distinct paths, but we talk about these two as being the path on the path of learning, or the paths in progress of learning, and then the path of no more learning. Okay, the path of no more learning. And I also heard you say among the five consciousnesses, some will be mental faculty. I didn't understand that very well. If we come back to the definition of mental faculty that we saw during our last session, what is called mental faculty is one of the six consciousnesses, the five sense consciousnesses, or the mental consciousness that ceases for the benefit of a moment of mental consciousness. Thus, the five sense consciousnesses can be mental faculty if just after they have ceased, a moment of mental consciousness arises. They are sense consciousness, but they can be mental faculty. Stanza 44, when you talk about the faculties, I thought it was said, it is considered that the three, the nose, the tongue, and the body, it was body? I don't understand why nose, tongue, body? Is it the whole body? I don't understand the difference between them. Here we are talking about the three faculties: nose faculty, tongue faculty, and body faculty. So you don't understand. I'm going to try and rephrase your question. You don't understand the distinction between the nose and tongue faculties and the body faculty. You're having trouble identifying this? For that, you can go back to the definitions of the faculties that were given in the beginning of chapter 1. The faculties are subtle matter, body faculty is particular, indeed. I don't have the exact definition in mind. I can say something nevertheless, though it may be somewhat approximate. I will say what I remember, and Sylvain can offer some additions. Body faculty is subtle matter that we find under the skin. And it seems to me that in a question and answer, it is said that it can also be around the organs. It is a subtle, transparent matter. Subtle and transparent, this part of the definition, is also valid for the other faculties. For example, if we consider eye faculty, it is said that all the faculties are subtle, transparent matter. Eye faculty resembles a cumin flower, for example. It's fairly small. Body faculty, we can also call tactile faculty, but generally we use the word body. It's like the soft skin of a bird, or like the softest goose down in the world. And it envelops the body. And the question is, isn't that fascia? I can't say. Perhaps it resembles this. However, we really try not to mix up different kinds of information and to stay with what's stated here. In any case, this faculty envelops the body. It's present throughout the organs, etc. Apparently, it's not in the hair, the teeth, or the fingernails, but the roots, for example, of your hair, fingernails, teeth, yes. Thank you very much. Could you come back to the analysis of the two eyes? Two eyes, let's see. Okay. Can you go over the analysis of whether the two eyes see or not? They see because they see clearly, or there was a doubt, wasn't there? In fact, not much more is said about this. Why do both eyes see? The postulate is both eyes see because we see clearly. The doubt that comes up is, couldn't we see the same thing with one eye? Then there is a refutation which states no. Two eyes, both eyes see clearly. I don't understand. But we can see with a single eye. Thank you for your question. In fact, here we can't really say anything more about this question. This question allows me to bring up something that came up for us when we were preparing this repetition, which is that here what's said is that both eyes are necessary to see clearly. And during the previous session, last May, I think Jackie asked this question. We had covered in a previous point, I'm going to try and figure out which point it was, in the second main part of chapter 1, the chapter that we're working on, the section that is the definition of the aggregates, dhatus, and ayatanas, there is a first part that describes their nature. This part is divided into 3 parts. The third subsection is a clarification of doubts. And within this subsection, last session, we saw that there was a debate between Vasubandhu and someone arguing with him concerning the difference between what is seen with one eye or with 2 eyes. Are you referring to this? No, it's just referring to my own experience. In any case, in the example from this point that we looked at, in fact, Vasubandhu concludes that we don't see more with 2 eyes. He said that we see the same thing as with 1 eye, but that there are 2 in order to embellish. Do you remember? The example was pretty exciting. It involved a monkey. And Vasubandhu shared the view shared by the Karmapa, which is that having 2 eyes gives a good appearance. So that was the point that came up in the previous repetition session. And we also shared the answer to a question that someone asked Khelzang Puntso about this. This question said that this point of view, that we see the same thing with 1 eye or with 2 eyes, was in contradiction with science. And he replied that 1 eye was enough, and depth, etc., is a question of habit. And so twice during the previous session, it was said that 1 eye is good enough. And here, in this point that we covered today, it said both eyes see because we see clearly. It seems that there's a contradiction. We're not sure how to explain it, and we'll ask Khelzang Puntso the next time that we see him. I have another question. I heard several times that in the entourage of mental consciousness, and this notion of entourage is not clear. What does it mean? Around consciousness? That's, to me, this is confusing. This will be presented in detail in chapter 2. We talk about it a lot. It comes up often. It came up this session. We hear about it a lot. In fact, a consciousness is never alone. It's always accompanied by distinctions, a distinction, a sensation, focus. These are mental events that accompany consciousness. These are mental events that always accompany consciousness. But they're not necessarily mental events that are always present. Could be, for example, desire. Desire is a mental event, and it can be present. For example, when I see a nice piece of chocolate cake, it can be present. And so when we talk about consciousness, and we talk about its entourage, this refers to whatever is present with it in that particular moment of consciousness. There are certain things that are always present, regardless of the moment, and then there are other things that are present depending on the moment or the circumstances, like desire for chocolate cake can be there, or if I don't like chocolate, then it won't be present. Also, these two, the entourage and the consciousness, the mental events and the consciousness, are governed by the 5 similarities that we went over. We will conclude here. Thank you for your presence and your attention. Sunam
Diye damje ziba ne domne nyebe dranam babje jega na je malam drobai sibe sole drawa drawa jo jambe babe jida jamba dang undo zambo de yan de jin de da ge je so da lo chen ye wa di tam je lam do ngo san je go so nyebe jina Dembe jila dongen de meje dembe jila jidang oam lam drobayo. Merci et à la prochaine.
Bonjour, avant que vous partez, j'ai une petite annonce. Est-ce qu'il y a 2 personnes qui pourraient aider avec un bout de nettoyage pour la salle d'études ?